It could be argued that as soon as man put order to words, propaganda became part of his repertoire of communication. People are motivated by self-interest, and that innate nature of depravity pushes humanity to use all of its skills towards that end. In its basic form, parents use the methodology of propaganda to train and discipline their children. They say things that are half-truths or concealed in their own desires in order to benefit the family structure and ultimately the parental interests. On its grander scale, propaganda can move entire swaths of people in a direction away from one line of thinking into another. The term propaganda was first used in Europe as a result of missionary activities by the Catholic Church. In 1622, Pope Gregory XV created in Rome the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith. This commission of cardinals were charged with spreading Christianity and regulating church affairs in lands unfamiliar with belief in Christ. The church even set up a college of propaganda under Pope Urban VIII to train priests for their missions. This unique relationship between proselytizing and building a regulatory narrative around the church was labeled as propaganda, and Western civilization would never be the same. While its initial use in language was one of honor and noble deeds done in the name of the faith, in later times, kings, emperors, and governments would learn how to use this methodology to move people in the direction the rulers wanted their societies to go. It has become inseparable from our modern way of life. Everything said in print, oratory, film, media, or even in person must be judged against this powerful tool of communication. While America might be the most masterful at its use in modern times, it certainly isn't the first democratically oriented culture to use it. In Athens, the Greeks of the citizen class were conscious of their interests as a group and were well informed on the affairs and issues of the city-state in which they belonged. Differences in religion, politics, behaviors, and the ordering of their society gave rise to one of the earliest forms of propaganda and its counter. Athenians, who were strongly opinionated people, would use their capacity at communication to mold the attitudes and opinions of their fellow citizens. While they lacked the modern methods of information dissemination like radio, television, and the internet, they still utilized the era's technology forms to move the citizen in the direction most desired by the state. The Greeks used sporting games, the theater, the public assembly, and religious festivals for pushing a narrative out to the people. They had learned how, in their young society, to move an entire group of people towards a given end. It was effective, and a model for all governments from then on. Today's America is a world through the looking glass of truth, where the real story is hard to understand and takes extensive work and skepticism to move past the interests of the ruling class. Propaganda is everywhere. The CIA, FBI, and other alphabet agencies use it extensively, not just upon the people of its own country, but in every corner of the world. They utilize media and all of its iterations to steer the world in the direction they want. Our current version has a sinisterness to it. There always seems to be a nefarious edge to anything on television, movies, news sites, or even the pop culture icons. If one isn't paying attention, the ruling class can go unchecked in its plans and accumulation of wealth and power. It takes vigilance to guard against it, even in the most benign of seasons. Turn the calendar to an election year, and the entire thing gets cranked up to 11. 2024 is turning out to be no different. The major candidates from the dinosaur parties have put their Paleolithic progeny up for the beauty contest, and both have dispatched of their pretend competition in the primaries without much more than a whimper. The general election is far more profitable and exciting for the major media outlets, and the grifters at Send Money Now to SendMoneyNow.com do everything within their purview to make sure that the election turns into Boogeyman 1 versus Boogeyman 2. They've concluded that there's no need any longer to worry about the 1 or 2% of people who nibble around the edges and compel those paying attention. They simply can pronounce the polls as scriptural, and the whole thing is finished. But this year something new is afoot. As if out of a cryogenic chamber, a more compelling voice from a previous America has emerged. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is becoming harder to ignore. An advertisement placed on his behalf by a super PAC during the Super Bowl sent disturbances through the dark side of the Force and began to bring out the media machines to quell this burgeoning noise. In the old world of labels, the left has sent everything they can against him: news outlets, op-ed pieces, celebrities, even his own family members. They have rented billboards in major areas that cast aspersions of doubt upon his character, beliefs, and real aspirations for the presidency. Some of his family has taken to their social accounts to condemn his running and allude to his connections to a vast right-wing conspiracy. The right, in its accustomed to laziness, has done its own form. It has accused him of being a gun grabber, a wacko liberal, a tyrannical environmentalist, and any other such buzzwords that Conservative Inc. has vilified over its 30-year dominance. But a funny thing happened on the way to the forum this time. RFK Jr. has done his homework. He's been on hundreds of podcasts, interviews, and in town halls that give him the light he shines the best in. While a campaign typically specializes in pushing its own narrative for the sake of victory, Mr. Kennedy seems to be without the typical political handlers who calculate every statement for polling results. He has good thoughts and comprehensive answers about nearly any questions put forth to him. He is also capable, unlike most of the Punch and Judy candidates we are familiar with, in abstaining from answers he needs to do more homework on, and is also willing to change his opinions on subjects based upon the evidence. This essay is part 2 of RFK in his own words. Listen to him. Pick his answers apart. He is the first candidate in my lifetime not relying heavily upon the media's image of him. He may be one of the most silenced and beleaguered voices ever to run. He has challenged anyone who wants to listen to him to find the areas they disagree with and be critical of it. On a second and similar note, both left and right have spent the last 75 years pushing further towards purity in politics. It has created less dialogue and debate, and has dumbed down the population to pick candidates for office based upon checkboxes. It has made propaganda that much easier for the ruling class to use. If no one fits every box, they need to be vilified and dismissed. When someone comes along and discusses ideas that are not perfectly in alignment with the propagated doctrines, they are accused of apostasy and tossed to the side. I believe America is tired of that method. The results have been atrocious. We live less free and more controlled by nearly everything than any previous version of the American Republic. Mr. Kennedy seems to be awakening a sleeping giant, a large swath of the population that are learning for the first time that the things they believed about the government were disingenuous at best and sinister at worst. Listen for yourself, debate this, and move away from the labels. They ultimately are not helpful in our descriptions. I think that you may find a vote and enthusiasm for Mr. Kennedy is not a compromise of your values or your positions. You may just hear what you've been longing to hear from a leader. Good leaders don't drag their people to their destiny. They point the way and let the truth do its annealing. The World Health Organization.
Well, I understand how the WHO works, and the WHO has completely lost its way, and now it's making a power grab to try to give itself the power to declare pandemics and then impose healthcare policy on its member nations. I'm not going to let them do anything like that. I'll defund the WHO. It's now become an instrument for China, for Davos, and for the pharmaceutical industry and for the big ag industry. And so we need those kind of studies actually done before we mandate or spend huge amounts of money, on pharmaceutical products that are clearly enriching pharmaceutical companies but are not well understood and well tested. And so I'm going to make sure that the WHO does those things, that it becomes a health organization again, otherwise I won't fund them.
Energy policy.
The same thing will happen if we build a national grid for energy. We turn every American into an energy entrepreneur, every home into a power plant, and we power this country on what Franklin Roosevelt called America's industrial genius, the innovation of our country, this entrepreneurial spirit, rather than Saudi Arabia oil or Appalachian coal. And that is what we ought to be doing. Once you build that grid, it becomes a marketplace, and the marketplace drives efficiency. The CEO of IBM announced that IBM was getting out of the PC, the private personal computer business, because there was no money in it. But then we built a marketplace. Now everybody has a personal computer, and what happened to the cost of bits and bytes of information? It went to zero. Today you just pump it into a phone and you've got it instantaneously for free. So the cost of bits of information went to zero. The same thing will happen to electrons if we build a grid for energy.
Chronic disease.
One after the other, they say to me, thanks for talking about these chronic diseases because I have, and then fill in the blanks. What's happening to our children? Why are we letting this happen to them? when my uncle was president, 4% of GDP went to healthcare. Today it's 20% and it's growing exponentially. And we're sicker. We're spending $4.3 trillion annually. We spend double or triple what European nations pay per capita, have the worst health outcomes. We're 79th in health outcomes. We're behind Costa Rica, behind Nicaragua, behind Mongolia, behind Cuba, the Republicans and Democrats. When you ask them about health care, they're arguing about whether we should have Obamacare or whether we should have single payer, public-private option, and all of those discussions are just about moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. Nobody's talking about how to end it, how to stop the ship from sinking. You ask CDC, how is this a good thing, what you guys did? They say, well, it's not our fault. It's because Americans have this chronic disease epidemic, the highest chronic disease burden on earth. But that doesn't exonerate CDC. Why is not anybody asking the next question? Why are we the sickest people on earth?
Spiritual renewal of the United States.
The purpose is to build character. We do that in a lot of different ways, but it's not by accumulating stuff. We're in a spiritual dead zone right now in our country where we have a whole generation of kids who are feeling alienated, dispossessed, disconnected from any feeling of community. And the beginning of spiritual renewal is restoring that sense of community. One of the ways I'm going to do that is to start a series of spiritual renewal centers of farms around the country where people will grow organic food, where kids will be able to go for free and get off of SSRIs, get off of benzos, get off of Adderall, and get off of illegal drugs. We need to build back a feeling of pride in our country and also a feeling of connection to our communities. And some of that can be done by using the White House as a bully pulpit to try to remind Americans of what our country is supposed to represent, what we're supposed to look like. And I think that's been forgotten. And it's not about, video games or social media, but there are some deeper meanings and deeper obligations and deeper connections that we need to have. I'm going to use the platform of the White House to try to reconnect people to community.
RFK's future cabinet.
I think about that a lot, and I think about specific people that I want in my cabinet, and I wanted to be like what Lincoln did, which is he included in his cabinet, which was probably the most effective in American history, a team of rivals, of people who didn't agree with him, of people that were in some cases more intellectually adept, of their own loyal political constituencies that had talents that he didn't have, and he wanted to bring all of those kind of the best people together who were really results-oriented to try to restore the country. And I think that's what we need today. People who are Republican and Democrat and independent, who are high-minded people, who are honest and have integrity, and who will work to unravel the capture of our public agencies and put this country back on the rail again.
So you have the hope that those people still exist and we can have that kind of work together?
I know they exist. I run into them every day.
The CIA.
I wouldn't disband it, but I would separate it. I will separate it from the espionage division, and I will have the espionage division overlooking the plans division, and I would use it a lot less aggressively. You can kill a terrorist with a drone attack, but who's measuring the impact of that, the long-term impact? Making a drone strike on an Afghan village and making everybody else in that village now want to strap on a suicide.
Right.
Nobody ever looks at that, and that is the kind of thing that's made America much less safe. So, and they recommended, and my grandfather concurred with the majority recommendation, that they disband the plans division of the CIA. Look at all of these actions they've taken and say, have any of these actually worked to make America a safer place, to improve our national security? And I think what we're going to find is that most of them just don't. Where most of them, there's blowback that is worse than the problem that they tried to solve. I'm very, very happy about your baby and about your decision. I believe that every abortion is a tragedy. I believe that, people who oppose abortion, that they need to be respected, and that we need to be able to have a congenial, respectful debate about that issue. I have fought my entire life for medical freedom, to make sure that the government is not telling us what medical treatments we can and cannot have. I understand the abortion issue is complex. Where I come down on the issue is that I don't trust the government. No solution is a good one, but I think we ultimately just have to trust women. We have to trust mothers. Be between ultimately the mother and her pastor, her spiritual advisors, and the medical profession. We should not have government bureaucrats making those decisions. It's really important for our government to support mothers who want to bring their babies to term but have economic problems. I intend to make that one of the priorities of my administration, because I believe every abortion is a tragedy. I never thought I'd run for president of the United States. I watched what was happening during COVID and saw my country going in a direction that I never thought would happen. And that's what made me run. And I have one objective, which is to restore the promise to this country and principally to your generation. The way that my dad gave me an America that I was proud of. And I want to give you guys an America that you can be proud of. So I want to thank you all.